I'd like to welcome you all to our latest webinar on improving your staff team by flipping learning. This webinar will provide you with the opportunity to reflect on the key areas being faced in schools regarding supporting staff at teaching and provide you with some tips and solutions. We like our webinars to have some participation, so please ensure initially you're muted, as that prevents feedback, but use the chat facility to ask questions. We'll try to respond as quickly as possible during our webinar. Presenting today's webinar is myself, Andy Goodeve, and Becky Howitt. We both have a background in education, both from a teaching and a leadership perspective. Your staff are the most valuable resource, both in ensuring the quality of teaching, but also the cost to an organisation's budget. Some organisations, for example, over 80% of their budget is spent on staffing, so it's important that staff are effective in their roles. Some leaders, however, like to have more of a hands-on approach and find it difficult to let go and delegate. It's totally understandable, as it's important they know what's happening, but the key is getting the right balance. The secret is to be the conductor of the orchestra and not having to play all the instruments. Successful leaders have trust in their staff, allocating roles and responsibilities. Giving these staff role responsibilities and ownership empowers them to gain the necessary skills. It'll ultimately benefit themselves in the organisation. These staff are employed for a reason, so now give them the chance to grow and show their potential. Remember, your staff are the actual future leaders. It's important that staff are provided with the appropriate support and guidance to help them develop. This may include providing clarity, so tasks have clear goals, smart targets, and information that impacts on the task. Motivation, giving them a reason and a purpose for their work. Efficiency, trying to cut out unnecessary repetition and duplication of tasks. Communication, finding time for that quick catch-up to help understanding and quickly settle any kind of issues, avoiding those back and forth tennis emails. Feedback, there's no hope of success if staff don't know how they're performing. Increasing the amount of success isn't all about having a list of what to improve, but also providing guidance of how to improve. Professional development. Staff need to be provided with relevant support and training through coaching, workshops, courses, seminars, shadowing and mentoring. Staff no longer have to also feel the constraint of learning a particular time and space. This fits outside the normal routine. This is about flipping the learning, what our webinar's on about today. It provides them with a lot more freedom to learn and when they feel comfortable rather than it feeling it's being done to them. Staff meeting time is for small group activities, while the content can be viewed at a convenient time. I'll now pass you on to my colleague Becky, who will explain some scenarios of how School IP can empower and improve your staff team.
Thank you, Andy. So my role today is to guide you through School IP to see how you can use the tools practically to help embed some of these bullet points here. And we're going to be looking at those in terms of flipping the learning. So in this scenario, flipping the learning means flipping the learning of the teachers, enabling them to become more empowered in making their own decisions about their own development, but also flipping the learning and helping teachers to become more empowered about whole school development and where that can lead us. So I'm just going to hang on one thing that Andy said. He said it's about taking charge and not being done to. So with that in mind, we're going to have a look at two scenarios. We're going to have a look at the scenario that involves an individual staff member. All staff can be involved in their own personal development, and we'll have a look at how that's done. And then the second scenario we're going to have a look at is how you can involve larger groups, or indeed the whole school, where all staff are being involved in a whole school development, and that can lead on to creating new school development plan objectives. So the whole school are really taking ownership here. So first let's look at scenario number one, an individual staff member scenario. So we're going to use a couple of tools. We're going to use the Area for Development tool, and we're going to use the Interim Review tool. So I'm just going to hop out of the presentation and go into our training system for School IP. So I'm logged in here as Gary Foreman. Now, Gary Foreman is a leader in school and he manages certain people. Now, Gary will go to my staff and he's going to find a member of staff called Jessica, because Jessica, it's been pointed out recently that she has a need for improving her higher order questioning skills in the classroom. Now, rather than the line manager or some other member of the SLT setting an area for development by going to what next and add area for development and just telling Jessica what to do, this time we're going to flip the learning. So the area will remain the same, but this time it's going to include the term research. We're asking Jessica to research into higher order questioning methods. Okay, and the action is for her to research at least 3 methods and try them in the classroom. And you might want to put a date for when you want that to be actioned by. And the support required is that we're going to have a 10-minute review on this, and I want that to be completed. I don't want to give it too long a time frame. I want to try that within 2 or 3 weeks. Okay, and I'm going to add that in. So now I can see it in Jessica's area for development in her portfolio, and I'm going to whiz over this screen here because this one's logged in as Jessica, and Jessica's going to have a look at her portfolio. She's had an email telling her that the area for development's been created, so she can log in, she can have a look, and she now can have a look at the new area for development, and she can click into that and read in the action. Note that Jessica can't change that because that's already been set by the SLT member of staff. So how's Jessica now going to add her research to this? She's going to do it by adding evidence. Now, if you've used the system before, you'll know that the paperclip, if it's open, means that no evidence has been added. And if it's been closed, that evidence has been added. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to what next? I'm going to add evidence. And it might be a file, it might be a text, it just might be a web link. Okay, I'm going to add some text. And I'm going to put method 1, add my details here, a bit about what it is, a bit how it panned out in the classroom. I tried it out. And I'm going to make sure that I've shared that with my line manager, Gary, who's set this. So I'm going to share it with users. I'm going to find Gary Foreman, and I'm going to add that in. So Gary now will get an email saying some evidence has been shared with you, and he can have a look at that. Or do you know what? He can just wait until they have the interim review. So what we're going to do now is go back to the head. Let's just refresh. Back into Jessica's area for development. So now Gary can see that, yes, the paper clips. Oh, don't think that evidence added. Just quickly added that piece of evidence again. What next? Add evidence. It was text-based. It was higher order questioning. And about method 1. Okay, share it with Gary. and add that in. Okay, that should have added now. Okay, so it might be that Jessica also wishes to add another piece of evidence. She might want to add a file this time. We can select the file, open up our evidence folder. Let's say it's that document there, and this is for method 2. To make sure that this is linked to the area for development. Here we go. Research into higher order questioning methods, and make sure that it's shared with Gary. Add that in. So that will link it now. It's my silly fault. I forgot to link it. Okay, so that's linked now. Okay, so once all that evidence is linked and once the date comes for the interim review, the idea is that Gary again would log in. He would look at Jessica's portfolio. He would look at the evidence that she's uploaded. There we go, for method 1. Okay, and method 2, click into it to review that evidence, to have a chat about how that went down in the classroom, maybe perhaps open up the file that's been uploaded. Here we go. And then start an interim review. So this is where the feedback bullet point comes in from Andy's presentation. So I would go to what next, add interim review. And the title is Flipped Learning Area for Development. And I'm just going to put higher order. And all I'm doing, I'm just going to have a look at that area for development there. That's all I'm doing. It's all I'm going to make a note of. And I'm going to ignore objectives, monitoring and standards. We're not reviewing that in this interim. And I'm going to say, yep, I'm happy that that's completed. Okay. Or it might be that it's still in progress because I might want her to do some more flipped work. Anyhow, I would put my final comments in, something along the lines of you researched it well, you tried it in the classroom, can you try researching 2 more methods, etc., etc. Jessica would put her comments in here, and then we would agree by putting both our passwords in or overriding it here. So there you have flipped learning. So flipped learning, putting the onus directly back to the staff member, but also with the support mechanism there of the interim review meetings. And we're just using this tool very simply, just for a very, very small area of Jessica's portfolio. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation now, and now we've had a look at the individual, we're going to have a look at how a whole school can use flipped learning in school IP. So this is the scenario. The scenario is that recently in our school it's been picked up in observations, etc., and discussion that there's been a decrease in pupil attitudes towards learning and behaviour. It's been noted in several individual staff's areas for development. It's been picked up in observations. Now, traditionally, in a lot of schools, the senior leadership team would take this on board and they would themselves discuss and develop a whole school-wide initiative. They might create a school development plan objective. But in this school, because we're an open and more of a free-thinking school, and we appreciate our staff's input, we're going to flip this. So in this school, staff have been invited to another action research project to explore the question, how do we improve pupils' attitude to learning and behaviour? And we want to do this before any assumptions are made and before any school development objectives are created. Now, for this, we're going to use the Ceph tool in School IP, simply as a project tool to collate all of the research information. It's already linked to the Ceph, so the question is already there, but please bear in mind that you can use the Ceph tool for many, many different areas, many different ways and many different projects. So the head will have an overview of all of this. They'll give feedback, they'll give recognition and appreciation. Time is limited, of course, all teacher time is limited. So the idea of the flipped learning is that staff can contribute at a time when it's convenient to them. And then any meeting time is protected just for the monitoring and the evaluation. Now, all of the documents, discussions and plans and actions need to be collated in one place. And like Andy mentioned earlier, email trails in this instance can become a nightmare. They can become so unwieldy and you can lose information and lose the trail. So with all that in mind, I'm going to go back into the training site. And this time we're going to have a look at the self-evaluation. Now, we could have a self-evaluation there called research project. We can create one, but there is a question in the Ceph that relate to behaviour and attitude. So this question, the first initial response is that we've noted here that there's been that decrease in pupil attitude. OK, and we've decided that we're going to invite all of the staff into this question on the Ceph to investigate how do we improve pupils' attitude. OK, now the first areas we're going to have a look at is the context of behaviour management. What are the areas of concern? What would we like to improve as a staff? And then we're going to have a look at the staff analysis of existing pupil attitude and behaviour. You know, what is it? Why, where, when, what happens, what's working, what isn't working? We need to be quite specific. And then we're going to send out some student questionnaires. We're going to get their feedback on how they are feeling about their behaviour and the behaviour of their peers. We're going to have a look at case studies of successful schools. How do others do it? And we're going to then discuss how we'd then embed a new strategy. So all of those questions from large groups of staff or indeed whole staff can be managed in these areas. And they can be managed by inviting people to make comments. So that could be the first step, is inviting people to make comments. Now, I would ask them to make their comments relating to the number of the subject matter in that response first, and then message them there. So then when they're added, we can collate all of these together. So if somebody else makes a comment relating to point number 1, if you're using this as a whole school, you're going to get a lot of comments there. I could just then use the filters to filter out all of my comments that have been returned on each relevant area relating to these questions here. OK, departmental responses are very similar. So it could be that the way that your school wishes to handle it is that from a departmental meeting, the responses come back as one. OK, and we could have this evidence area here where members of staff can also upload documents and text by going to what next. So add into a folder, perhaps miscellaneous, or we could create a new folder. Selecting our evidence type, are we going to upload a file, text or a web link, and uploading that to this area here. And again, if we label it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we can filter here on our evidence that's been uploaded. So who is invited here? That's decided in the collaborator area. So there's a bit of setting up to do, and if this is something that any school out there looking at the webinar is interested in, we would help guide you through this, because all of this group would need to be set up and given the right access rights to enable this group of staff to do what you want them to do within the CEF. Okay, but once that's set up, we can give members of staff either view, answer or approve rights only. Okay, so how do we assign staff? We would go to what next, and we would assign members. I've already added the teaching staff. So let's say we want to add the teaching assistants as well. Okay, here they all are. I'm going to add them and I want them to view and I want them to answer as well. I want them to be able to contribute. I'm going to save them there. So now they're added to the list and they'll be able to add comments and departmental responses and evidence as well. So once all of this evidence is gathered over a period of time, it might be that first you look at number 1 week and then number 2 another week and then number 3, etc. over a 5-week period. You have certain people here in the collaborators who can approve. Okay, now those people can then contribute to the CEF response, and their response obviously is going to be based on these comments. In question 3. Okay. And now they will be making their responses. So 1, what information have they gathered here from everything that's been contributed? Number 2 is the header, what's been gathered here, etc, etc, etc. Now, it might be from these regular monitoring and review activities, which the time aside is set just for that, not for further research, but just for monitoring and review, that we decide that actually we do need to put objectives onto our development plan for this time moving forward, because it's a longer term strategy. So this is what we can do from the CEF. We can add objectives or priorities onto the development plan. Now to do that, I am going to go to the paperclip and I can clip it and I can add it to an existing objective. So it might be in our CEF. Learning behaviour strategy. Okay, and the activity is agreement on learning behaviour. So that's what we're doing now. So I'm going to save that. So all of this activity in the CEF is linked to this already set objective in the SDP. Now, I might want to create a new objective underneath that priority as a result of this monitoring cycle. So I'm going to add a new objective by clicking on the downward arrow. And the new objective might be to obtain a trial version of a behavioural strategy, for example. You would input your success criteria here and the start and end date, and I could add that in. So now that's added in to my school development plan, ready to be expanded upon. So the top and bottom of it is in conclusion, if you wish for many staff to become involved and it to be project managed in an easy way where all information is collated, then your CEF tool could be it. Now, I've used a question as part of the whole school CEF, but you can set up a separate CEF and it could have just been called behaviour, or if it's another project that's running, or if it's another action and research project that a couple of individuals are doing, a SEF can be set up to handle that. And the beauty of it is it collating it all together, but also being able to link back and forth to the development plan. So I'm going to just flip back to the presentation and just ask if there are any questions on any of those areas. I know that obviously some schools perhaps haven't been using it as long as others, and so aren't as well on the way, but just as food for thought, it would be really interesting to get your feedback. So if you don't have any more questions, I'll just quickly reiterate that we do offer free and unlimited online training. Andy is your point of contact there. And this is the link that Andy was talking about to the webinars on our website, Deventio Education, and you will find it under information under webinars. And so there are lots of webinars there that are coming up, and ones that have been pre-recorded. And here are our contact details should you need any further.